Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Have you ever wondered what New York City was like before the skyscrapers, the yellow cabs, and the bright lights of Times Square? Today we're taking a journey back in time over 400 years to explore the raw, untamed beginnings of what would become the greatest city in the world. Forget everything you know about modern New York. We're heading back to the 1600s, to a time of wooden ships, dirt roads, and incredible transformation. Let's dive into the fascinating early days of New York. Believe it or not, in the early 1600s, New York wasn't called New York. It was a Dutch settlement known as New Amsterdam. The famous explorer Henry Hudson, an Englishman sailing for the Dutch, first explored the area in 1609. Following his voyage, the Dutch established a trading post and a colony, all managed by the powerful Dutch West India Company. Their focus was primarily on the lucrative fur trade with the native populations. The settlement grew slowly but steadily around a fort on the southern tip of Manhattan Island. This Dutch chapter of the city's history is incredibly important, as it laid the groundwork for the multicultural and commercial hub it would later become. The Dutch influence is still visible today in names like Brooklyn, Harlem, and Coney Island. But this Dutch rule wouldn't last forever. In 1664, tensions between the English and the Dutch were high. An English fleet sailed into the harbor and demanded the surrender of the colony. With little ability to defend themselves, the Dutch governor, Peter Stuyvesant, handed over New Amsterdam without a single shot being fired. King Charles II of England then gifted the territory to his brother, the Duke of York, and just like that, New Amsterdam was officially renamed New York. It's hard to imagine, but New York in the 1600s was tiny. Forget the 5 boroughs. The entire settlement was concentrated on the very southern tip of Manhattan, an area we now call Lower Manhattan. Think of it less as a sprawling metropolis and more like a compact, fortified village. In the mid-1600s, the population was just a few thousand people. For comparison, that's less than the number of people you'd find in a single modern skyscraper during a workday. The settlement was a small cluster of activity surrounded by dense forests, marshes, and rolling hills that covered the rest of the island. It was a frontier town, a remote outpost on the edge of a vast, unexplored continent. The growth was slow at first, with settlers cautiously expanding beyond the initial fortifications. The city's small size meant that everyone knew each other, creating a tight-knit community where news traveled fast by word of mouth. It was a far cry from the anonymous, bustling city of millions we know today. So what did this tiny village look like? Well, there were no paved roads or grand avenues. The streets were narrow, winding dirt paths which would turn into muddy trenches every time it rained. Getting around could be a messy business. The buildings were simple and functional, mostly constructed from wood and stone. You'd see small gabled houses typical of Dutch architecture, alongside basic churches, taverns, and essential trading posts, where goods were bought and sold. To protect the colony from potential attacks, both from other European powers and from some Native American tribes, the Dutch built a defensive wooden wall across the northern edge of the settlement. This wall stretched from the East River to the Hudson River. Over time, the wall was dismantled, but its legacy lives on. The path where that wall once stood is now one of the most famous financial streets in the entire world, Wall Street. It is amazing to think that the center of global finance was once the literal edge of a small wooden town. One of the most remarkable things about early New York was its diversity. Even from its earliest days as New Amsterdam, it was a melting pot. Of course, there were the Dutch settlers who founded the colony, but they were far from the only group. The Dutch West India Company was primarily a business, and they welcomed people from all over Europe to come and work. You could hear a multitude of languages on the streets, including Dutch, French, English, German, and Scandinavian languages. Alongside the Europeans, there were the original inhabitants of the land, the Lenape Native Americans, whose relationship with the settlers was complex, involving both trade and conflict. The colony also had a significant population of enslaved and free Africans. The Dutch used enslaved labor to build much of the early infrastructure. This mix of cultures, languages, and traditions from the very beginning set the stage for the cosmopolitan city New York would become. Survival in this new world depended on cooperation and trade among these different groups, creating a dynamic and sometimes tense social environment. Daily life in 17th century New York was anything but easy. It was a life of hard work and simplicity, stripped of all modern conveniences. There was no electricity, so when the sun went down, life was lit by candles and fireplaces. There was no plumbing, which meant getting water from wells and using outhouses. Sickness was a constant threat, with no modern medicine or understanding of germs. An infection from a small cut could be a death sentence. Most people were involved in agriculture, farming the land to feed their families, or in trade. The harbor was the heart of the settlement. It was the city's lifeline, connecting it to Europe and the rest of the world. All essential supplies, news, and new settlers arrived on ships that sailed into the port. Men worked as farmers, merchants, sailors, and craftsmen like blacksmiths and carpenters. Women's lives were centered on managing the household, which was a full-time job involving cooking over an open fire, making clothes, raising children, and tending to gardens. It was a tough existence, dictated by the seasons and the constant struggle for survival. Before any European ships ever reached its shores, the land we now call New York was home to Native American tribes for thousands of years. The primary group in the Manhattan area was the Lenape people. Their name for the island was Mannahatta, which is often translated as Island of Many Hills. The Lenape lived in close harmony with nature. They were skilled hunters, fishermen, and farmers, cultivating crops like corn, beans, and squash. Their villages were scattered throughout the region, and they had a deep spiritual and cultural connection to the land. The arrival of Europeans changed everything forever. Initially, relations were based on trade, with the Lenape offering valuable furs in exchange for European goods like tools, cloth, and weapons. But as the European settlement grew, so did the demand for land. Through a series of sales, treaties, and conflicts, the Lenape were gradually pushed off their ancestral lands. The new European way of life, with its permanent structures, private property, and agriculture, irrevocably altered the landscape and destroyed the traditional lifestyle of the Native American people. From a small Dutch trading post on the tip of an island to one of the most influential cities on the planet, the story of New York is truly incredible. In the 1600s, it was just a tiny settlement of a few thousand people with dirt roads, wooden houses, and a defensive wall. But it had a diverse population, a strategic harbor, and a spirit of commerce and ambition. That small seed of potential, planted over 400 years ago, grew into the sprawling, vibrant, and iconic metropolis we know and love today. The journey from New Amsterdam to New York City is a powerful reminder of how places can transform over time. I hope you enjoyed this trip back to 17th century New York. If you did, please give this video a like, share it with a friend who loves history, and make sure you subscribe to the channel for more stories from the past. Let me know in the comments below if you want to see more videos about Old New York. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.